tiny piece of land that we see today. It is actually much larger than that, and when you look at it, it does look like the shape of a harp. It resembles the shape of a harp. So we see that the Father himself begins to play the chords of redemption. He begins to play the chords of deliverance on his harp, or his promise that he gave to Father Abraham. And the wind of change begins to blow, and it's time for the children of Israel to be set free. As we sang the song earlier, set my people free. And you see that in the beginning of this Torah portion, the revelation is said to Moses. It says this, that the patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they knew of my name, but they didn't know it personally to a certain degree. They knew him as El Shaddai. What is El Shaddai? The name of El Shaddai, it's connected to the promise of multiplication of the seed. But when YHVH comes in on the scene, remember Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they weren't in slavery like the children of Israel were. Jacob probably had a certain percentage of being in slavery in his uncle's house, but out of his own mouth he said it was just like a few days, so that doesn't count. 21 years doesn't count because Jacob says it was just like a few days to me. So Yahweh himself is going to reveal himself in such a powerful way as we've seen through this Torah portion, and it is just like him to use the actual plagues that he used to just debunk the very gods that Egypt was worshiping. So he says, you want to worship the Nile River? Well, let me drain the very life of the Nile River itself so that nothing will come forth from it, just to show you that I am the only Elohim. Let me begin to reveal these things that you worship, and let me show you who's in control of what, just to show you, Pharaoh and all of Egypt, that there is one Elohim, there is only one God, there is only one creator of all things, and he says his name is what? Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. I exist because I exist. I don't need to prove myself to any entity in the universe. Everything, even creation itself, is constantly singing and constantly moving and constantly revealing through its embedded frequencies of its own that he created himself, that constantly declare the praises of Yah. What is it? Psalm 19 says this, the heavens declare the glory of Yah. That means the heavens and all of creation are constantly singing. So the Father was using the natural elements of the world to destroy the bondage that was on Egypt, upon the children of Israel in Egypt. But I'll give you one more thing. Just kind of going way out in left field, but you'll see next week how it just comes together. Mitzrayim was an actual womb. The empire of Pharaoh of that time was an impenetrable empire. No empire has ever penetrated the system of Pharaoh and Egypt at that time. There was no man on the earth that ever penetrated and ever took over and ever brought into the land of Egypt an entirely different thing ever before, but Yahweh himself did. He planted a seed inside of a womb called Mitzrayim that no man had ever entered before. And Pharaoh himself was going to be used by the Almighty himself as the very, and just hear what I'm saying, he was going to be a prophetic picture of the hymen of a future woman that was never penetrated before. The Pharaoh that rose up was never penetrated by a man before. There was no one that ever came into the forces of Egypt, but Israel was going to be a future picture also of a seed that Yah himself would plant again inside of the belly of a woman, and by his outstretched arm he would wind up delivering. Pharaoh's name, Paro. Can you guys say Paro? Paro, when you look at Pharaoh's name, and many of us are familiar with the Hebrew letters, you have the Peh, the Resh, and the Ayin, and the He. On the outside of Pharaoh's name is the word Peh, which means mouth. On the very belly of Pharaoh's name, or inside of the very heart of Pharaoh's name, is the Resh Ayin, which is the Hebrew word Ra, which means evil. So what the Father had to do, he had to remove the evil out of the mouths of the Egyptians. He was going to remove the evil from the midst of Egypt in order for Israel to begin to speak freely with their mouth again, Peh. And we see this. But I'll show you guys next week through the name of Pharaoh and Egypt and all these different plagues. The Father uses frequencies. The Father uses judgments. And I'll show you and tie it into the modern time that we're living in. The Nile River will be the first thing that goes, and then the rest of the plagues will follow suit. And the Nile River represents the economic force and power of Egypt then, and it will be the economy of the world today that will bleed out, that will wind up showing the very pattern of all the other plagues coming about, and the judgment of Yah. He does this. We shared this past Erev Shabbat. He raises up powers and nations and governments because he can. He did. He told Pharaoh, and we read in the Brit Hadashah, in the book of Romans chapter 9, he says, I raised Pharaoh up. Does the clay have anything to say to the potter and say, you know what, why did you do this? No, the potter is in complete control. He raises up the forces of the world today only to reveal his perfect plan, and we'll wind up seeing that next week. It'll be a double portion. I know that's not the way the rabbis are doing the double portions, but we're going to do it like that next week because we can. So what I want to do, I want to really thank the Father for being a blessing to this congregation in many, many different ways. I wish everybody was here today, but everyone that's here is supposed to be here right now. The Father sent a special brother Steve Rees, our direction to bless us with a gift that he has in him, in his soul, in his spirit, in his fingertips. I want to bring Brother Steve Rees up right now without any hesitation. Let's welcome him. We're going to do the old switcheroo right here. But I know we're going to be blessed. And you guys will see next week. You'll see, wow, this all just came together so perfect. What a blessing. So, Father, I just pray that you continue to move through Brother Steve, and that your Ruach will have free rule and reign in the midst of all of us here today and in this entire atmosphere. And may your hearts and your minds be open, and bless you guys in the name of Yahweh Elohim. I need a couple guys to help me out, though, to help Brother Steve out. We're going to play Steve right in the middle.
Okay. Is this picking in the speaker or just your recording?
It's the recording.
Okay. All right.
It's the recording.
Okay.
Yeah, what we're going to do is drop. I'm going to leave this pulpit here.
Just see. It's not enough.
Let me know what's comfortable for you, Steve.
Okay. Okay. That'll be fine. Yeah.
Put you right in the middle where that chair's
Okay.
placed right now.
Alrighty.
Which side do you want this on, Steve? Right or left?
Probably here would be good. Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Is there enough to get there? Here. Okay. Right. Yeah, I will. And do the old hand wave if you think I'm winding up and I forgot.
Right click forward, left click
Okay,
back.
very good. All right.
You can test it to see if it kind of go, okay.
Yeah. All right, good. Well, this is it's always one of the really fun things that Shirley and I get to do. Keep my voice up. Does this need to be closer? Okay. Anyway.
We're going to get you a mic too.
Okay, all right. Okay. I'll just sit that kind of that way, and then we can then.
Just lower if you want, or you can choose whichever.
Okay. Is that better? You're hearing me much better. Okay. All right. Well, as I started to say, one of the fun things that Shirley and I get to do is to travel around and meet incredible people everywhere. I know you thought you were the only incredible people in the in the United States, but believe me, there's some others out there too. And that's one of the privileges the Father gives Shirley and I, to be able to go meet incredible people. And it's just a pleasure to be with you, incredible people, here today. So, and it's not an overusage of the word incredible to say that, because I find that wherever people are digging into relationship with the Father, it's an incredible situation, because the Father is drawing us, and He's called us to His Word, His excellence, His everything. And what I want to share with you today is just a little piece of that. I'm going to be talking about musical frequencies, and that could sound like a really dry subject. It's like, well, what is a frequency? And we could say hertz, and how many times something vibrates per second, and that starts to sound very scientific and very laboratory-ish and kind of. But I'm here to tell you that every single one of you, as John just said, we're all vibrating a certain frequency. Every cell inside of us is vibrating a frequency. Our blood cells are vibrating a frequency. And everything has an individual frequency. And if we were smart enough and spent enough time and went into the laboratory, we would be able to identify each item by the frequency that it's emitting. So frequencies is a part of us. If I had time, I probably don't today. There's an incredible YouTube out that just, it basically shows how frequencies make different forms of matter move and take shape. Okay, Shirley says she thinks we will have time. I started on this journey back in 2006. I was playing the harp by then. In 1998, I had such an interest in a harp. I always enjoyed Celtic music, and harp is always a part of that. And so for my birthday, I bought myself a little kit and made myself a little harp, because they were too expensive to just go buy one. So I thought, I can make one. And it turned out pretty nice. And so I started playing with it. And the Father, the Holy Spirit, when I was born, I was given the gift of hearing music quite accurately. And so I could pick up pretty much any instrument and start playing something on it fairly quickly. So that was a gift that the Father gave me. That's not something that I can lay claim to myself. It was a gift. And unfortunately, I did not use that gift very well. I certainly didn't. My little one talent sat there for a long time until I was 45 years old, when Father started dealing with me about that. And I won't get into all of that. I'm just to say that fairly late in life, the Father brought me to the harp. And so in 2006, I started asking the question, what would the Psalms of David have sounded like? And we're in 1 Samuel, it records that, in fact, we'll go over that text in a minute. It records that Saul would have a troubling spirit come upon him, and David would play the harp, and that spirit would leave. And I thought, what kind of music would have made that spirit leave? Now, I'm a registered nurse by profession, and with my little harp I had, I did hemodialysis treatments, and that's where you hook people up to a machine that cleans their blood. And so when I started getting brave enough to finally let people hear me play, I started taking the harp in, and I would, we're going to be here for 3 hours. Do you mind if I practice my harp while we're sitting here waiting? And I never got turned down. And pretty soon it started getting called music therapy and alternative therapy and all kinds of things. Then I started getting asked to teach a class on alternative therapy, music therapy. And the reason why I became so attracted to the harp as a therapy, I'll put quotes around that, was that I saw so many incredible things take place while I was playing the harp for people that were receiving the treatment I was giving. I saw blood pressures come down. I saw oxygen saturations come up. I saw pain medicine that wasn't working start working. I saw people that couldn't sleep. Within 15 minutes, they were snoring away. And I started thinking, there must be something to this music. There must be something more than just music. And so that started me on the path. And then I heard a teaching by Rico Cortez. I'm sure you're familiar with it, the Song of Moses and the 144,000. And he started talking about some things that really started piquing my interest. I said, there's something more here than what we have first taken a look at. And so I won't go over his teaching because that's his teaching, and at the same time, I'm sure you're all familiar with it. But one of the things that he brought forth was the idea. No, let me go back to 2006. When I went to Israel that year for the Feast of Tabernacles, I took it on myself. I want to approach every rabbi that'll talk to me, any archaeologist that'll answer questions, any musician, any artist, anybody, historian. Is there anybody that has any information about what David's music would have sounded like? And so I got the basic short answer of no. But I got some other encouraging words because people were working on some ideas that I ran across, that there must be something embedded within the actual text of the Psalms itself, the Hebrew characters that make up the text of the Psalm. And several people were working on that level. There's one group, Music of God. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. Uriel, I think, who's since passed, but I believe his work is still being done. He started with that concept. Mika Harari, who makes harps I'll show you one of his harps down the road here. He started working with the idea that each note represented a Hebrew letter. And when I talked with Mika, he said, just kind of maybe start with that idea and maybe something will come to you. Just work on it, That was the main thing I got, was just work on it. So anyway. So we know with the Hebrew language, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with the idea that we have the Gematria, we have the Paleo-Hebrew, that Hebrew is a pictographic language, that each one of the Paleo characters represented, like the ayin is the eye. It's a picture of the eye. So it's telling you that what it is, And the yod is the hand, and on down the road. So every one of the characters not only is the character, but it has a picture that tells you what the character is talking about, and it has a gematria, a number that's associated with it. And we know that, like here, if I say something's bad in English, well, you who have some gray hairs, that would mean one thing. Some of you younger ones, bad means really good. So the English language has done a 180-degree switch in a generation or two. Well, Hebrew doesn't do that. Hebrew stays the same because of the nature of each of the characters. So you can actually use, and I'm sure you've done some teaching on this here, but you can use the understanding of what each character means to understand what the word means. And so that gives you sometimes I don't even know the meaning of a Hebrew word, but I look at the characters and go, well, that must mean this. And then I look it up in the dictionary, and sure enough, it's got that connotation. I had it figured out by looking at the characters. So Hebrew is a very stable language in that respect. And so I started asking the question, could it be, and what Mika was sharing with me and some of the others, we're taking this idea that possibly each Hebrew letter actually also had a frequency that was associated with it as well. Why not? And so then the sand plate studies, I think Rico has this in his, but I've taken some more looks at some other stuff, and man, it's just, this whole field of cymatics is just incredible. The geometric patterns and all kinds of things. And so, some of the geometric patterns have the hexagon and then the pentagon, and then so different frequencies have different characters, and so it just gets really amazing. The further you get into it, it's just incredible. There's all kinds of stuff on YouTube about cymatics if you're interested in the subject. But the thing that got my attention was that one of the earlier cymatic experiments was to speak a Hebrew letter into the microphone that then transferred that vibration to a sand plate, and look at the formation of the pattern that formed on the sand plate. Whoops. Uh-oh. Is there a laser on this? On the bottom? Circle button. Oh, right there. Okay. Okay, so you see here the Aleph, this is the sand. With at least a very close semblance. Now, one of the classes I was doing said, well, that's the Babylonian, that's not the Paleo. You know? It's like, well, come on, guys. You know, the key is that there's a relationship, okay? That's the key. That's what I want. If some of you get lost in some of the math I'm going to do here in a minute, don't worry about that. Just take the idea home with you that there is a relationship between a Hebrew character and a frequency. If you can just take that one little thought home, then you've got something to work with, okay? So here we go. That got my attention. So then I went, well, what does Scripture say about a relationship? And so first thing, we went to Psalm 22. I won't get involved into this because I'm sure you got, but the key here is that Yahweh inhabits the praises of Israel. Israel, and we are all Israel, right? So there's something about our praises spoken or sung to him that he inhabits. And the word there is to shove, or he actually presses into. Okay? And so that really got my attention. There's also in the book of Acts, I like to get Britt and Tanaka together. Because I love it when it all confirms each other, because it proves once again. But they didn't. They praised. And so what happened? Yahweh pressed in on the praises of his people. So what happens when Yahweh presses in? He makes an earthquake, okay? So I'm not saying that every time you praise there's going to be an earthquake, and I shouldn't say that here in LA. That's probably I might be careful. Somebody's going to get me for causing something. But there's something that took place when Paul and Silas praised Yahweh. Now, this is the one I was referring to earlier. Shaul would have his troubling spirit come upon him. So they said, seek a skilled player on the lyre, and that word there is the kinnor, which is the U-shaped harp that many people call the Davidic harp. There's also the word nevel, which is what this harp is. And nevel can also mean gourd, and so it's referring to the hollowness of the sound box on this, okay? That's how the relationship works. So when David would play, it would go. Whoops, I went, oh, see, there we go, okay. So that was something there, and that's what I was beginning to observe, as I told you, at the bedside with the people I was working with. So there's another relationship. Just after Saul was anointed to be king of Israel, remember he went and hid in the donkey tack and everything. Anyway, Samuel told him to go up where they had instruments like flute and psaltery and tabret and pipe and harp. And he said they'll be playing these instruments and they will prophesy. And so when he got in the middle of there, Saul had never prophesied a day in his life. But all of a sudden, he's in where this frequency is being emitted from these instruments, and he begins to prophesy. So there's some kind of relationship going on between the word of Yahweh and the frequency. Okay? Do you see the relationship there? And then we see, once again in 2 Kings, Elisha is called by the king. He says, I need a word from the Lord. Tell me, what does the Lord say? He said, well, I don't have a word from the Lord. I can't tell you what he says. But you know what I tell you? Go get a harpist. That's what the whoops, did I do that again? Whoops, okay. Go get, it says here a minstrel, but if you read the context of it, it's one who plays the harp. And as they begin to play, I will receive a word from the Lord, a prophetic word, and I will tell you what the Lord says. And so that's what they did. And he received a word, and he gave the word to the king. So there was a definite relationship between those frequencies being played by the music and a word being delivered from the Lord. And we also see in 1 Chronicles, David, he also, it says close to here that he actually invented instruments. I think this is one of the ones he invented, actually, because we have the word nevel in the psalm. So because a lot of people think that only the more primitive kinnor was available for David, but I believe that, all the pictures of David, he's got the little kinnor, but I think possibly he actually invented, this is one of the ones he invented, so that there would be more sound. Now remember, David was a prophet, so we're going to hold on to that thought too, because as we start to talk about frequencies that we find in Scripture and how David applies those frequencies to his psalms, a lot of people think, here's a problem we have. Darwin came along and said, if you go back far enough, you're going to find a one-cell creature, and then if you get a little bit further, they're going to finally grow legs, and then they're going to crawl out of their puddle, and finally, like Brad Scott says, from the zoo to you by way of the goo, or from the goo to you by way of the zoo, And so we think that the farther back we go, they just didn't have any technology. How could they know anything about frequencies or anything? I get asked this all the time. Well, what would they have tuned with? They didn't have any electronic tuners back then. And I go like, we don't know what they had. I think we're finally starting to catch up on some of the stuff that has been lost. And, when Yeshua said, as it was in the days of Noah, so was he talking just about the wickedness? No, I think he's talking about technology. I think he's talking about all kinds of things going on. Those are just my thoughts. I'm not going to preach that as a theology, but I'm just thinking that we have been fooled into thinking that David couldn't possibly have known all this stuff. I think he did. He was a prophet. Father would have told him what he needed to know, revealed to him what he needed to have to make these things, to put these things in place. And I'm going to talk with you about I think, an exciting idea, and it's just an idea, but I'm thinking, wow, maybe so. But anyway, we'll get to there. Anyway, David set up the captains who their job was to prophesy on those instruments. That was their job, prophesying on instruments. That was what was being done every day in the tabernacle of David. Okay? So it wasn't just music, and I shouldn't just say just, but there was a whole level of receiving words from the Lord along with that music. Okay? So, now this is one of the 22-string harps that's made by Micha Harari, and he's in Jerusalem, actually a little bit west of Jerusalem now. He used to be in, but now they're out in another little area. But if I could point out close enough, and I can't, but by each string, he has carved in one of the Hebrew letters. And so his idea was that somebody who didn't know any music at all or anything could sit down in front of one of the Psalms in Hebrew and just begin to play one letter at a time and begin to play the music of the psalm, just by going with that. And so that idea is what kind of piqued my interest, and that's what I started working with. So my version of that started here. Oops. Back in 2007, I put this together. I thought, if it's true that there is a note for every letter, then you ought to be able to bring the musical scale and the aleph bet together and find a transcription between the two. And so I decided arbitrarily, I have to say, that I wanted to make the yod be the middle C, because I thought, you know, there isn't really an exact middle to a 22-letter alphabet, so you're not going to be able to have the letter that's the middle. So, but I was thinking about the meaning of the yod is so many of the times the yod is telling us in the word that it has to do with the hand of Yah in our lives, okay? And if you have anything to add to that, John, that, you know, but that was my understanding, and so that's why I felt that it would be important to bring the yod in make it the foundation where everything else works out of. So I then ran down to the aleph, which is an A note, and I ran it up to the tav, which is also an A note. And I thought that was kind of interesting that they both would be an A surrounding the... Anyway. There's several... Well, let's move on. So what I did first was what Uriel did, was to take a note and put a note to a letter. So shir, to sing, has the shin, the yod, and the resh. Now, here's the first problem you run into, is that Hebrew goes one direction and music goes another. So how I solved that issue was to write each word separately so it goes correctly by the Hebrew, and then make the music flow in the direction that music goes. I hope that's not too confusing, but so my first one I did was Psalm 23, and I tried playing it like a melody. And I just have to say that it didn't make musical sense. It was chaotic. It was all over the place. There was not a harmony to it at all. And so I'm going, well, that's not working. So Father, is there something else I need to look at here? And I believe the Holy Spirit showed me this. Instead of trying to play each of the notes, take the whole Hebrew word and look at the notes that are in the word. Now, if you play one note, you just are playing like a melody, okay? If you play three notes together, what do you have? What'd you say? Well, harmony. What do we call that? A chord. Okay, all right. So now you'll notice that all of those notes aren't in the C chord that I just played. Okay? But what we do have is two of the notes, and so I developed a kind of an algorithm of does it lean more towards this chord or this chord, okay? So when I started getting these worked out, I started playing just the chord progressions, and like what we see up here, we have, whoops, I need to tune that one there, sorry. Okay, let's try it again. So that's the first line. So it's not just a haphazard one note at a time. There's already some kind of a harmony that's starting to take place. And what I found was when I started playing these progressions for people, they would just sit there, can you just keep on playing that? I want to just use that to go to sleep with, you know. And so I thought, well, there's something here. There's something here that's more. And I'm not attacking Uriel because I know that he was working on something, so don't take me wrong. But most people have listened to his, they have his CD and they'll play it once and then they put it away. They tell me that it just kind of, it's not soothing. It's not, okay. And that, I believe, is just because, like I said, it doesn't make the musical sense when you just follow that. But when you begin to go to the chord patterns, then something different is starting to take place. And so some of you who are musicians, whenever you have a group playing together, you normally have the words and then they have the chords sitting above. So what are you seeing there? You're seeing chord progressions. And so I'm going like, oh, duh, that's how music works. Wouldn't David have possibly known that? So that started getting me on that track. Now, the interesting thing is that, whoops, wow, I went way too far here. Anyway, when we get to the Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey, I got the E, F, E, C. Well, those are the primary notes in the C chord. Now, at that time, when I first started this, I didn't know about solfeggio scales. I didn't know about solfeggio notes. About a year later, I was introduced to a fellow named Leonard Horowitz, and he had written a book, and in that book, he talked about the solfeggio scales, and one of the major frequencies of the solfeggio is the 528 frequency. That's called the healing frequency. It's called the restoring frequency. I call it the creative frequency. Now, the main note of a C chord is 528. So here we are. The C chord is what came out of Yod Hey Vav Hey, and that was before I knew about the 528, but it came out before I knew about it. And here it is, Yod Hey Vav Hey, that's the creative frequency. There's something going on here. I have another thing I'll show you in just a few minutes, but I just want to stop here and talk about this for a minute. Many of the rabbinic teachings out of the Talmud, my understanding is that one of the writings is that when Yod Hey Vav Hey created, he did not just say light be. He sang light be. Light be. Okay? And he did it with the 528 frequency. He did it actually up here. Light be, light. Anyway, light be. Okay, that's what he did. He sang in 528 frequency. And out of that 528 frequency that he sang came forth creation, the universe. So that's how we got here. How do we stay here? I believe we stay here the same way, by staying in harmony with that 528 frequency. And we'll get back to that, and just hold that thought because I think there's some really neat things to think about. So, okay, 528, where in the world can we find that in Scripture? Well, I believe we find it in Numbers chapter 7. Numbers chapter 7, let me review with you, is just when the sanctuary is being finished, the tabernacle, Moses' tabernacle in the wilderness, and it's time for it to be dedicated. And each of the tribes brings a gift to the tabernacle for the dedication. Now, when I was in high school, if I had written a paper like this, the teacher would have handed it back to me and said, "You're padding, you're just trying to get more words." You could have said that with a whole lot fewer words. Because if you look carefully, you'll see that the same words, 1 spoon of 10 shekels of gold full of incense, 1 spoon of gold, 10 shekels full of incense, 1 golden spoon. They kind of changed the order a little bit, but it's really the same thing. They didn't, so you ask yourself, first of all, if Yahweh was the author of this, and every word he uses is for a purpose, he doesn't waste one word, why did he waste a whole bunch of words? And as you know, a friend of mine I was talking with, we were talking about the double Hebrews that occur out in Scripture, and that he says that's like a speed bump. Whenever you see that, it's supposed to slow down and look around because there's something you need to pay attention to there. It's not there just by accident. It's there to tell you that you need to look and pay. So we don't just have a double Hebrew here. We have a 12-fold Hebrew here. 12 times it says exactly the same thing, except for the fact that it's a different tribe, a different day, and a different person that brought it. But that could have been handled very easily by saying so-and-so on this day for the tribe of Judah, and so-and-so for this day on the tribe of Ephraim, and on down. And they each one brought this. That would have been the easy way to do it, but he didn't do it that way. He did it 12 times. So let's take a look. Are there some patterns here that might reveal something to us? Now there's a system of mathematics that's very, very old that's called Pythagorean. And what it does, it's similar to the Hebrew gematria, in which every number is reduced down to a single number, but it's slightly different. It works off of, like, verse 12 is the first verse we're going to work with. 12 is 1 plus 2, and that gives you 3. 1 plus 3 is 4. 1 plus 4 is 5. 6, 7, 8, on down. Now 1 plus 9 is 10, but 10 is 1 plus 0, so that gives you 1. Now, already some of you are probably thinking, but the Masoretic text does not have verses in it. Okay? All right? Can I just invite you to think about the patterns and the fact that each one of these verses is really a separate Hebrew thought, okay? And if we were to number each of those Hebrew thoughts, and then the next time it starts to repeat the same thought, that we take note of that number, may I suggest to you that we would find the same pattern if we did that than if we relied just on the verse numbers. So if you'll give me the grace of going with these numbers, what we're talking about is a pattern, okay? And their pattern is definitely there. All right. So what we end up with for the first 3 sets of verses that talk about the first 3 days, we have 3, 9, 6, 4, 1, 7, 5, 2, 8, 6, 3, 9, 7, 4, 1, and 8, 5, 2. What happens when we go to the next 3 days? Same thing. Repeats again. Next 3 days, same thing. Repeats again. Next 3 days, up to the 12th day, we get the same set of numbers 4 times. Now, the Torah says that out of the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses is a thing established. Well, we have 4 witnesses here. So my belief is that we should pay attention. Now, a lot of you may not have been, you might say, well, that's fine numbers. What do those mean? Well, let's take a look at the solfeggio frequencies. We have 396, 417, 528, 639, 741, and 852. And those are just the same numbers that we just got over here. Okay? So, now what I don't pay attention over here, I was just looking at the closest note that we have, that we use today, that would match up to those. The one I like to really focus on is this 528, because it's called the healing frequency, it's called the restoring frequency. It's used by geneticists to repair DNA strands. If any of you are familiar with the work of Emoto from Japan, he did a whole lot of work with the freezing crystals of water. And he took sewer water and froze it, and it had a real deformed. Then he put the 528 frequency, played it through that water for a period of time, refroze it, and the crystals were perfect. So that's the restoring quality of the frequencies that we're talking about. So now we found those frequencies. How are we going to apply those frequencies? Because remember, the original question was, what did David's psalm sound like? So it's one thing I've got those frequencies. That's a nice frequency. I can play that frequency, 528. Okay, what am I going to do with it? How does that relate to the Psalms? And so the next clue came from Psalm 119, I believe. And actually Leonard Horowitz shares some of this as well. So a lot of this is not unique with my brain working overtime to finally come up with this. A lot of it's just research, finding what other people have been working with and finding what works, I believe. But in Psalm 119, remember you have 8 verses. And once again, if you don't get hung up on the verse thing, because each one of those, in fact, to me, this actually helps confirm how number 7 really works, because in these, what's called a verse by English numbering is a Hebrew phrase that begins with the letter Aleph, and there's 8 of them. 8 of these phrases that start with the Aleph, and they've just happened to put a verse number in front of it, okay? So to me that kind of adds a little ammunition to my argument back in number 7, okay? So then the second set of 8 starts with verse 9. The next set of 8 starts with verse 17 and on down through 169. If we use that same Pythagorean series with those, we're going to come up with an interesting phenomenon. We start out with verse 1. Obviously, that's going to be 1. Verse 9 is going to be 9. Verse 17 is 1 plus 7. That equals 8. So that's 8. 2 plus 5 is 7. 3 plus 3 is 6. On down the road, okay? So now we have a numeral that corresponds with each Hebrew letter that's established by David in Psalm 119. So now we have we have 6 frequencies and we have 9 numerals. How are we going to solve that one? Well, I solved it by starting out with the A to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then starting over 7, 8, 9. And that seems arbitrary, but I have to say that it has worked out very well. And there's several things that confirm that for me. So now I used A, B flat, C, D, F, and G because one of the last known solfeggio written music was a piece called the Hymn of St. John the Baptist, which is a Gregorian chant that was written in about AD 1000. After AD 1000, the 7th notes was added in, and to what we have today, and then somewhere along the way the half notes came in, so we ended up with 12 notes in our scale today. But in that hymn of St. John the Baptist, these are the notes that appear. A, B flat, C, D, F, and G. Notice E is not there. And E to E flat range, some have labeled, if you look it up in some of the solfeggio literature on Google, if you Google solfeggio frequency and look at some of the literature, the E flat range many times is called devil's frequency because it's supposedly has been observed to have negative effects versus healing effects. I've ticked off a lot of guitar players when I've said that. And I'm not saying it to say that that's wrong, but I encourage to think about bringing a lot of your music, instead of being in E, go to D. That's only 1 note difference. It's still fairly easy to play. And just my thoughts. Or F. You can go 1 note either direction. And I really like F better because F is what these notes are. This is actually the key of F. The key of F and the key of C are the same exactly except for 1 note, and that's the key of F has a B flat and the key of C has a B natural. So Both of those work really well in the Psalms of David. As I have worked with the Psalms, some of the Psalms sound better in the key of F and some sound better in the key of C. And that's just by what my ear is telling me. I'm not, it's very, but anyway, let's go into how we're going to apply these numbers that we just found in Psalm 119 to how that might affect how we would bring the music out of the Psalms of David. Now, I think it's very interesting that we have Psalm 119, and then the very next psalm is Psalm 120. Duh. But what is Psalm 120? Do you remember what Psalm 120 is? Shir HaMa'alot. It's the psalm, a singing of coming up. It's called the Psalm of Ascent. Okay? And so, from Psalm 120 to Psalm 134, 15 of the Psalms, they're all called Psalms of Ascent. And there's a lot of information about how these Psalms were used. First of all, the Psalms of Ascent were sung by Israel as they came up to Jerusalem. Now, if any of you have been to Israel and been to Jerusalem, you know that Jerusalem is very high on the top of the mountain and everything else is below it. And in fact, if you're in Jericho, you're 1,000 feet below sea level and you have to come up to 3,000 feet above sea level to get to Jerusalem. So you do come up to Jerusalem. So it's said that the pilgrims, as they would come 3 times a year to the feast of the Lord before to Jerusalem, they would sing these psalms as they came. Now, another use of these psalms was every morning. Between the court of the men in the temple and the court where the brazen altar was, there were 15 steps. And the priest would stand on each step and sing one of the Psalms of Ascent. Second step, Psalm 121. Third step, Psalm 122. Fourth step, 123. And on up for the full, all 15 of the steps. They would do that every morning. Now, let me just say this one thing before I give you my thought on that. Once again, we come to Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh like we did with the other system. This time we're using the numbers that we got out of Psalm 119. And those numbers are 1, 6, 5, and 1 on that scale that I just showed you. When we add 6 and 5, that's 11, plus 6 is 17, plus 1 is 18. That gives you the number 9. 1 plus 8, 9. So the frequency for the letter Yod-Heh-Vav, for the word Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, is C, which is, that's what it was the last way. So to me, this was a very confirming fact, confirming piece of information that Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh doing this system was the C chord, the healing chord, the 528 chord, just like it was in the previous one that I'd done when I took the Yod and brought it to the middle C. So both of the systems produced almost the same results. And so that gave me confidence that this was a reliable way of looking at bringing music from the psalm to the ear, from music out of the text of the psalm to hearing the music. So let me go back. We'll come here. Oops, let's see. Yeah, I'll leave that up there. But I just want to say, if David understood the power of the frequencies that Yahweh created with, and the restorative healing qualities of those same frequencies, and that he wrote his psalms as a way of bringing us back into harmony with the 528 frequency. And he actually wrote the 528 frequency into the Psalms of Ascent, and those psalms are being sung every day by the priests and at least 3 times a year by the pilgrims coming up to Jerusalem all through the land. The time of David is referred to as the Golden Age. It says that many say that there was never a nation that was richer, never a nation that was more prosperous, never was there a nation that has such harmony as that time under David's rule of Israel and into Solomon. It started falling apart with Solomon. But during David's time, Israel was the creme de la creme, the best of the best of all the world. Is it possible that the frequencies were responsible for that? The frequencies and the words combined? Is it possible? If that's possible, is it possible that we today can have the same kind of effect in our lives if we will use those frequencies and those words in our lives? I think it is. It's one of the things. Leonard Horowitz, he's an interesting fellow. He's not totally on the same page I am, but he does believe in Yeshua. He does believe, he counts his lineage back to Solomon. But in the book he wrote on, and I'm going to get a little bit of do here, so be careful. But you're all familiar with mad cow disease, right? Leonard believes, and he has some really good documentation to back this up, not just one source, but several sources, that it's a weaponized version. It's a weaponized bioweapon, essentially. It was created in a laboratory, let's just say that. Now, the mad cow disease is a prion. A prion is not even a virus. It doesn't even have its own DNA. The only thing it can do is tell DNA that's in place in another cell what to do. A prion is considered, the closest word that you can use to describe what a prion is a crystal. It's a little grain of matter. Now, I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember doing this, but I did this. Have any of you ever made a little crystal radio set? All right. So you know that there's no transistors, there's no electricity, there's nothing involved. There's just a crystal and some wires that are wrapped, and you go along those wires to change the channel, okay? But what the crystal does is it takes a frequency that's out there. There's frequencies all over us right now. I mean, we all have our cell phones and stuff, and if we were to flick those on, we would be able to go talk with somebody, and they would be, or they might call us or whatever. There's frequencies all over the place. And so what the little crystal radio did was it takes the radio frequencies, they're in the air, and it amplifies them to a point where we can hear them if we have a little earpiece, okay? So let's just work with that idea. A crystal, which is a prion is a crystal, amplifies frequencies. Now that means that a prion can amplify negative frequencies, or it can amplify positive frequencies. Now what if Yahweh in his great wisdom, even before time began, from the foundations of the earth, he created our ability to turn it back on the enemy. The enemy has come up with these prions to try to make us sick, to try to make us decay and fall. But we can use that same amplifying of frequency and put the right frequency in and receive healing and restoration and creation. I think that's a pretty cool idea. So I just think that the Father is starting to drop things into our lap. You know, what is it, Peter that speaks about, to those of you on whom come the end of the age? I believe he's talking to us. I believe the end of the age is coming upon us. A little story. I was just received a phone call just a little over a week ago, almost 2 weeks ago now. And a lady, Nancy, she said, "You don't know me." I found you on your website. I have been on a 30-day spiritual retreat, and I forgot to bring my music with me. But she said, the Lord led me to your website, and I have to tell you, the music, because I have a whole bunch, I've got like this list on the side of my things of all this sample music, so you can just go listen to that you don't have to buy anything. And she said, I've been listening to that, and it's just, she said, first of all, there's a quality in that music that's different than anything I've ever heard. And in fact, I think all of it is music that I've brought from the Psalms. And so she was recognizing that relationship that exists between the words of the Psalms and the music of the Psalms. And so she said, but I want to tell you something. Something happened to me back in 2007. I was driving along, and all of a sudden, the Father just dropped this song in on me. I got the words and the tune and everything, but the really weird thing is that the words I didn't even recognize. She said, I think it was Hebrew, but I didn't speak Hebrew, so I didn't know I didn't really know for sure it was Hebrew. So my husband was in the financial realm, and one of his clients was a rabbi. She said, the next time you see the rabbi, could you see if he would be willing to listen to this and tell me whether it's Hebrew or not, and if it is, what it's saying, what it's about. So a couple, 3 weeks later, it happened that the rabbi was able to listen to the song, and she sang it for him, and he said, where did you get this song? She said, I told you, I was driving, and Father just dropped it in on me. He said, where did you get this song? She said, well, is it Hebrew? And he said, yes, it is Hebrew. She said, well, I don't even speak Hebrew, so I didn't make it up. Father dropped it in on me. He said, so he finally accepted that she had received a download from the Father. He said, well, this is a very old song. He said, this song was written by Moshe, and it's a worship song. And it's a song that our rabbis in the Talmud say is not to be sung until Mashiach comes. So that was just dropped in on her. That was in 2007, and she felt that her assignment at that point was to go to Israel and sing that song all over Israel. And when she got to the Temple Mount, she got thrown off of the Temple Mount for singing up there. But anyway, but she's supposed to send me the song, because as we were talking, we're thinking maybe some of what the harp is doing and some of what the Father has shown her somehow needs to come together. I also will tell you that on our way out here, we stopped in Georgia. A fellow also found me by my website, and he plays the shofar, and he plays the shofar like I've never heard before. Is it that dropped out? Okay. Anyway, there. And I played you this morning, and it's phenomenal. But I would call it shofar at a prophetic level. And he and I have been talking about one of his shofars. He's actually having tuned to 528, so that he's going to be able to play the shofar with 528 frequency. And he thinks that somehow the harp and the shofar are going to come together in something as well. Now, there's another story from Micah Harari, and this happened probably back around 2007, 2008. When he first started making the harp, so it might have been a little earlier. The first one he made was a kinnor, the U-shaped Davidic harp. It was for Shoshana's birthday. And when it got time to put the strings on, how many strings should I put on? And then he remembered the scripture. He said, upon the 10-string lyre I will play. So he put 10 strings on it on the basis of what the psalm said. And so Shoshana was very happy, had her birthday and everything. It was sitting in the bedroom, and she would get out and play it. And one day there was a knock on the door. And she opened, and there was a rabbi there, a very old rabbi. And he said, I understand that you've made a kinnor. May I see it? And so, come in, get you some tea or whatever. They brought the kinnor into the rabbi, placed it on his lap, and he held it, and then the first thing he did was he began to count the strings. He counted 10 strings, and then he began to weep. And after a while, he said, "You probably wonder why I'm weeping." He said, in the Talmud it is said that just before Mashiach returns, there will be a restoration of the 10-string lyre. And you have just placed one in my hand. So there's all these little things that are happening. Interestingly enough, most of them have to do with frequencies. And I believe that the Father is doing something in our midst, if we're willing to listen, if we're willing to hear. When the elders, it says that in Revelation, the elders are around the throne 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Maybe there isn't even any days because he's the light, but constantly, holy, holy. Every time they're saying, and they're singing it, I believe once again, I believe it's every time they've just seen something different that they never noticed before about the King of the universe. We were just with a group a few days back in Texas, and the little old Ruthie, 80 years old. She lives in Israel most of the time. She said, "I believe when it says in Zechariah 12 that Yeshua comes and he puts his feet on the Mount of Olives and it splits all the way to the eastern gate." She said, "I don't think that it's going to be because of Yeshua's touching there. I think it's because we will be praising him. And our praise will be what splits the earth on two sides." I'd not ever heard that before. I'm like, I think you're onto something. Because I don't know if you know who Tesla was, but he said, if you give me the right frequency, if you let me play the right frequency, I can split the earth in two. There's power in the frequencies. It's creative power. It can be destructive power, but I believe Yahweh has given us a way for it to be creative power. I wanted to play just a couple of the Psalms because I want to just give you a sampling of what has come out of the Psalm, what I'm working with. Actually, do you want to do one of this? I'm going to challenge you all to sing along with me on this. Let's see. Now this is a little slower. Psalm 61. This is one of the first ones I tried to just take the words of the Psalms and put it along with the music. Oh, just go back one to the back. Okay. See where the circles are? In all of the ways of the chord progressions, what I started looking for was chord patterns that could cycle. Because I was thinking, well, the way we sing music today, we don't just sing a whole string of chords. We usually sing a pattern. So I started looking for patterns in the Psalms, and this is one of the patterns that came out. So we'll use this pattern to sing this Psalm 61. So, hear my cry, O Elohim, listen to my prayer. Hear my cry, O Elohim, listen to my prayer. From the ends of the earth with fainting of my heart. I call out to you, out to you. I call, set me down upon a rock far above where I am now. For you, Elohim, have heard my vow. You have given me the heritage of those who fear your name. You have given your heritage to those who fear your name. Prolong the life of the King. May his years go on for many generations. May he be enthroned in Yah's presence forever, in his presence forever. Appoint grace and truth to preserve him. Then I will sing praises to your name forever, forever. As day after day I fulfill my vow. Yes, day after day I fulfill my vows. I fulfill my vow. Well, that got really fun. Let's see. Thank you. There's another one, Psalm 91, that I just worked on. Let's see if I can find it quickly. Oh, come on. Song. Yeah. Oh, there we go. Thank you. So the next thing I wanted to do, that one, I was trying to get all of the words of the psalm in, and that was one of the first ones I was doing. The next thing I was thinking, well, you know, when I'm driving along, I like to sing worship songs and stuff, you know, and so is there a way we could put Psalm 91 into a form that you could do that with, you know? So this is my attempt at that, and you can help me sing this one too. This works better in D. And that kind of brings up just a little teeny point. The music I'm bringing comes into the key of C or F. Sometimes in order to sing it, we'll transpose it into another key just to get it into the voice range. I don't think it's a problem, but anyway, that's I will dwell in the secret place of Shaddai, and abide in the shadow of my God. I will say unto him, You are my refuge, my fortress. In you I will trust. I will not be afraid of the terror by night, or the arrow that flies by day. Your angels lift me up, and they protect me in the way and deliver me. You set me on high, you know my name. When I call, you answer me. You're with me in trouble and show me long life. In your salvation I can rest. I will not be afraid of the terror by night, or the arrow that flies by day. Your angels lift me up, and they protect me in the way and deliver me. You cover me beneath your wings. You are my armor and my shield. 1,000 may fall, 10,000 more, but on me it shall not come. I will not be afraid of the terror by night, or the arrow that flies by day. Your angels lift me up, and they protect me in the way and deliver me. I will dwell in the secret place of Shaddai, and abide in the shadow of my God. I will say unto him, You are my refuge, my fortress. In you I will trust. Thank you. Now, one of the Psalms I'd like to play, I'm actually working on some words for this, but I'm not quite there yet. But I wanted to play Psalm 121 because it, to me, demonstrates probably more than a lot of them how closely connected the words are with the chord progression. If you want to get out Psalm 121 and read it as I'm playing it, I think you'll see a connection and hear a connection and sense a connection with what's going on there. Everybody got it? Okay. this is Shirley's favorite, and I'll probably stop with this one, or with. And you just get that down, okay? This is Psalm 134, and this is a little bit happier psalm. And just take a minute to explain that too. What we end up with out of here is chord progressions. Now, you still have to interpret how to play those. What would that? Is that a fast one or a slow one, or is that a 2/2 time, a 4/2 time, a 3/4 time? Now you notice the last one we did was Psalm 121, and to me that's the words of the psalm are talking about intimacy and closeness with the Father, like Psalm 91, same thing. And so I chose a 3/4 timing because that's like a waltz kind of a timing. So that gives you that impression of that intimacy, that dancing the waltz. That's kind of. So that's kind of how I interpret the Psalms is, and then loudness, softness, all of that kind of. I use the words a lot to help interpret what the psalm is going to sound like. So, because I believe there's a relationship between the two. Okay, so let's just keep that idea going. There's a relationship between the words and the music. So, now this is Psalm 134. So. I think the harp is a very unique instrument. I believe it's no accident that it's. I still have to check whether it's the shofar or the harp that are the most mentioned instruments in Scripture, but either one is pretty significant. Anyway, but you find it all the way from Genesis to Revelation. The harp is mentioned all the way through. And I think part of that is just the very nature of the harp. Remember, I don't know how. There's one of the things that Shirley and I do that is kind of how we got started with this ministry. Is she tells a scripture story while I play the harp in the background, emphasizing the moods of the story. And if we have enough time, we'd love to do one for you. So you tell me how much time we have, but. I just wanted to do a couple of things on the harp, and then you give me the signal whether the story would be okay or not. Oh, I got the signal. Okay, Shirley, get ready. Okay, all right. The harp is unique because all the strings are open all the time. And if I just do one string, you can feel any other string along here, and you'll feel a slight vibration. So every other string is affected by the one string. And then when I play a chord like this, all the strings are going on. Plus the strings that I touched are still going. They don't just stop, they just keep going. And there's quite what they call a decay, which is that sound gradually coming down. But the harp, because all of the strings are open, there's all of those strings going all of the time. And so that there's a whole set of subharmonics that's taking place all the time. And since the harp is one of the most ancient instruments, I don't think that's by accident. I think that whoever made the first harp was being inspired to create an instrument that would do that. And I believe it's one of the reasons why we see the harp in Revelation continuing to be utilized as worship, and possibly, there's so many ways I can go with this. But the very fact that we all are vibration all the time, it tells me that when we're worshiping, if we're really entering in, like your worship this morning was just phenomenal. I love coming into houses of worship that understand what worship is, and you guys understand what worship is, and thank you, because I just come in and just put my glass under that Niagara Falls and get filled up, because I need that. I go to some pretty dry places sometimes. So thank you. And when we enter in at that level, we are really synchronizing, I think, with the Father. Because as I've explained, He creates with those. So when we come into worship and He presses down and all these dynamics are going on, it's really, it's a unique opportunity as a creature of the Creator to be able to come into that place of worship. Yeah. Oh, right. Okay. I was telling John about this before we started. If there was enough wind, I tried to do it with the fan there, but it didn't seem to be enough. Can you do that other fan real hard? Because I want you to hear this. If we could, there wasn't enough wind outside. We tried it, but this harp will play itself. Well, actually, not itself. It will use the ruach to play itself. So, and we might need to see. I'm not. Put the mic on. Can you hear it? Maybe on this side, or back here would be good, where the sound hole is. Can you hear that? I can hear it really good up here, but the only disadvantage of this is that it's one speed. If it's outside with the breeze, it goes all kinds of different speeds all the time, so that it goes up and down as the different velocities of breeze hit it. Now it's starting to get old. Try one speed lower. That's lowest, okay. So you're hearing it now, right? Okay. I hear that vibrato coming in there. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay. So anyway, you get the idea, huh? Yeah. Okay, anyway. So that gives you a little sample. It's better when it's the natural, the ruach. Couple different times I was with Mike Clayton one time, and we had just done one of our stories, and I left the harp up, and he started talking, and this breeze, it was outside, and this breeze came up, and the harp just started whoa, 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 and Mike stopped. He goes, "Whoa!" And it was kind of fun, but a story of that, there's two stories really. Oh yeah, Mike, I'll sit back down. Okay, Mike. Okay, there's two stories actually. One is that David would. It's said in the Talmud that David would set his harp up into the window of his sleeping quarters. And the reason why he did that was in the morning when the breeze kicked up, it would start to make that sound that you just heard, and it would wake him up and to come to his prayers for the morning to worship the Father. And because he wanted to get up early, he wanted to not waste his day, so he would put his harp up there so that it would wake him up and call him to prayer. And then the second story is my own experience. Remember in Psalm 137, it says, by the rivers of Babylon, they asked us to sing a song of Zion. How can we sing when we're in a foreign land? You said we hung our harps in trees, in the willows. Well, we were at our friend's place in Colorado, and I have a smaller harp. It's a 26 string. The reason why I got it is because it fits in the overhead bin of the airplane, so I can take it when we fly to another country. So I have a little harp with me. And so I'd just gotten that harp, and they had a willow tree out in their front yard, and it was kind of breezy that day, so I hung the harp in the willow, and the harp just started humming along. And it was really pretty sound. And our friend came out, and she said, "Oh, that's wonderful." And then about a minute later, she says, "Now I know what that means in Psalm 137. She said, when they asked him to sing a song, they didn't know what song to sing or even couldn't sing a song. So they hung their harp in a tree so that the Ruach would play the song for them. So the Ruach would choose the song to play." I thought, wow, that's a really cool interpretation. But once again, that's speaking to us of how closely integrated the Father intends for us to be between his wind and his Ruach and us and these instruments and things. So anyway, it's a great thought to think about that interpretation of what was really being spoken of there in Psalm 137. Now, in Psalm 49, chapter 49, verse 4 or 5, depending on which verse you're using, which version you're using. And this is a little bit of a paraphrase out of looking at the word studies. It says, "I will reveal my mysteries with the parable," or the story, "and I will unite heaven and earth on the harp." And Shirley and I, as we've gone around, we believe that that's what the Father is having us doing, is using the story and the harp to work on what, basically it allows us to speak to people that we probably wouldn't get to speak at before. And the stories that Shirley tells are so powerful because what she does is she places herself in the person that's in that story. She becomes that person. And I won't say any more. I'll just let her start to tell the story, and you'll see what we mean.